They told you who you should be, what you should believe, how you should feel. But something inside you refused to stay silent. You didn't have the words for it at the time, but what you were doing was more than rebelling. You were waking up. Your spiritual awakening didn't begin with meditation or books or rituals. It began the moment you started questioning your parents. The moment you looked at the people who raised you and realized they don't have all the answers. That moment cracked something open inside you. It planted a seed that grew into higher consciousness. You felt guilty, confused, even scared, but you couldn't go back. And deep down, you knew you weren't the one who was broken. You were the one breaking free. This is for the chosen ones who began their spiritual awakening not in temples or books, but at the dinner table, sitting in silence, wondering why everything felt wrong. Let's dive into the 6 powerful signs that questioning your parents was the true beginning of your transformation. You realized love had conditions. They said they loved you, but only if you stayed quiet, only if you followed the rules, only if you didn't speak too loud, cry too much, or dream too big. You were trained to believe that love had to be earned. That being good meant being small. But as you got older, you started asking, why do I feel invisible when I'm being myself? That question was your first step into awareness. You started noticing the emotional strings attached to their affection. The way they praised you only when you performed. The way they ignored you when you struggled. This realization hurt deeply, but it was the spark. It made you question everything. You started unlearning what love is. And that unlearning, it's what cracked the door open to higher consciousness. You weren't rejecting love. You were redefining it. You noticed the emotional inheritance. You began seeing it clearly. Your parents were carrying pain too. Their anxiety, their anger, their emotional patterns. They weren't just raising you. They were projecting onto you. You realized their expectations had more to do with their own wounds than your potential. And that realization was heavy, because now you weren't just questioning them, you were breaking generational cycles. You saw the emotional chains that had been passed down, generation after generation. And you said, it stops with me. That moment of awareness, that refusal to pass the pain forward, is pure spiritual evolution. It's what chosen ones are here to do, to heal what was never healed before. You became the emotional translator of your family, and though it felt isolating, it was sacred work. Their truth didn't feel like your truth. There was a moment when you sat quietly, listening to your parents talk about life, people, success, maybe even spirituality, and something didn't sit right. It wasn't that they were wrong, it's that their truth didn't resonate with you. You felt a growing disconnection. What they called discipline, you experienced as control. What they called tradition, you felt as limitation. You started seeing the cracks in the stories they believed. And for the first time, you stopped absorbing and started observing. You stopped nodding. You stopped pretending. That shift from passive agreement to conscious questioning is one of the biggest signs of awakening. It means your inner wisdom started waking up. You weren't looking for a fight. You were searching for truth. And that truth had to be yours, not inherited. You could no longer ignore your inner voice. There was a time when you silenced your intuition to keep the peace, when you swallowed your truth just to avoid conflict. But eventually, that inner voice got too loud. It didn't care if it made things uncomfortable. It was calling you towards something deeper, something real. You started listening, and once you did, there was no going back. You questioned your upbringing, your culture, your emotional habits, even your identity. You realized, this isn't who I am. It's who I was told to be. That voice inside you? That's not rebellion. That's wisdom. That's your inner guidance system waking up. And the more you followed it, the more your life started shifting. The more you felt the pull towards spiritual growth, emotional healing, and higher consciousness. That voice didn't ruin your relationships. It revealed them. You felt alone in a full house. You were surrounded by people, but you felt unseen, misunderstood, maybe even emotionally orphaned. This is common in spiritual awakenings that start at home. You looked around and realized, no one is really hearing me. No one is really seeing the real me. That loneliness was your initiation. Because only when you feel separate from the familiar can you start reconnecting with your true self. You began seeking answers outside the roles you were given. You started creating emotional boundaries. You stopped participating in the family theater. And it cost you connection, approval, maybe even love. But it gave you something far more powerful: clarity. When you're alone but no longer lost, you've tapped into your own frequency. That's awakening. You chose truth over approval. This is the moment everything changed. When you stopped living for permission. When you stopped chasing validation. When you decided, I'd rather be real and rejected than fake and accepted. That choice cost you comfort, but it gave you power. You stopped molding yourself to fit their expectations. You stopped explaining your boundaries. You stopped apologizing for evolving. And even though it shook the foundation of your relationship with your parents, it solidified the foundation of your relationship with yourself. You stopped performing and started becoming. And that's when you knew your spiritual awakening didn't start in a meditation class. It started the day you looked around and said, "This isn't me. I'm ready to find who I really am." That moment of inner revolution, that was the birth of your real life. If you've experienced even one of these signs, your journey has already begun. You're not alone. You're not crazy. And you're not broken. You're awakening. And that's not a peaceful process. It's messy. It's painful. It's sacred. Questioning your parents doesn't make you ungrateful. It makes you conscious. And consciousness is what leads to healing, to freedom, to truth. So if you've ever felt like the black sheep, the outsider, the misunderstood one, know this: you were never meant to fit in. You were meant to wake up. You were meant to question. And most importantly, you were meant to grow beyond what raised you. That is the path of the chosen ones. That is the real spiritual awakening. If this spoke to your soul, thank you for staying with me till the end. If even one sentence made you feel seen, like, subscribe, and share this with someone else who's quietly questioning everything too. You're not alone anymore.